Hi there, this is DM Nell, and this is my second episode of Tonight We Game. And so, what I would like to talk about this evening is basically this guy right here. And I wouldn't be even doing these videos if it wasn't for this. So, I kind of feel like I have to get D&D out of the way early. So that'll free me up to talk about other games that I enjoy playing. Although I'll always talk about D&D because it is one of the games I enjoy playing. There's plenty of D&D videos out there already, so I don't want to add to the glut of Dungeons and Dragons. But I feel like I kind of have to set my foundation here and get past that. So Dungeons and Dragons is the first role-playing game that I played, and it basically started me off on this whole lifetime of gaming, and so it holds a very special place in my heart. I do currently have D&D 5th edition, and I have run it many times for my friends. I'm not currently running it because I'm just not in a place where I'm running it right now for anybody, but I enjoy it. It's a fun game, and it is a well-designed game, but I have issues with it. And let me just preface this by saying I have issues with every role-playing game. There is not a role-playing game out there that is perfectly designed. And that's because everybody has their own preferences on how role-playing games should work, or, how they want it to work, how they envision it to work. And so I think that that should be taken into consideration by game designers to a certain extent when they're creating their games, so that their games can be somewhat customizable for the GM and their table. And that's the main problem I have with Dungeons and Dragons, is that many of the rules that are in place are kind of codified into the system, to the point where modifying them can be problematic and can cause issues elsewhere in the game system. So what I would like to talk about today is, first of all, there's a lot of rumor about sixth edition coming out. So first of all, is that true? Is 6th edition imminent? And if so, what could be changed? What should be changed? And what are my ideas on what D&D should look like? So I don't know if there's going to be a 6th edition. I assume there's going to be a 6th edition. D&D is owned by Wizards of the Coast, who's owned by Hasbro, who is a for-profit company who makes games that need to be profitable, and role-playing games are profitable up to a certain point until their system has aged to the point where the audience has pretty much all of the there is to offer for the game. And so the only way really to rejuvenate a role-playing game is through putting out a new edition. I've seen this cycle going over and over and over again over the decades. I've been playing D&D since high school in the 80s. And that was 1st edition back then. We're on 5th edition now. And every edition after 1st edition that I have seen released has been released for the sole purpose of rejuvenating the game. Now, sometimes they incorporate a lot of innovative mechanics and really change up the game, but most of the time it is to, basically, start the game over so that the profit cycle can start over for the company that owns it. And I'm simplifying things, but ultimately that's the motive of any company. There would not be a 5th edition if Wizards of the Coast didn't think that they were going to be making money off of it. Now, of course, the designers want to make a great game and want to make a new and innovative game. I'm not saying that they're only putting out a game to make money, but that's the main driver, is to make money. So whenever a new edition comes out, it is being driven by the fact that the company that owns the property needs to rejuvenate the property so that it can be profitable again. So that is going to happen with D&D 6e. Now, are we there yet? I don't think so. I think that D&D is towards the latter half of its, or is in the latter half of its life cycle, but it's still got some life in it, at least in comparison to other editions that I've seen. It's still going pretty strong, and it's in its 7th year, I think, 6th or 7th year, maybe 8th year. I'm not really sure exactly where we're at. But I think I think 5e was released in 2014, maybe 2015, so 5 or 6 years. But at any rate, the fact is that D&D has released a lot of stuff. I've got a shelf right here that is full of D&D 5e stuff. Now, admittedly, it's not as much as what we had for 4th edition. I've got an entire 2-drawer cabinet over here full of D&D 4th edition stuff. And then I have an entire bookshelf over here of 3rd edition stuff. So there's a lot more that they could be putting out for 5th edition that they'll probably put out in the next couple of years. But my guess is that at some point in the next couple of years, if they haven't already started the process, they're going to be starting to look at what 6th edition is going to look like and probably announce a 6th edition at some point in the next couple of years. So that's just my prediction based off of the cycle that I've seen repeating over the last several editions. So with that being the case, what could be changed with D&D? You can't have a new edition without changing something. Otherwise, it wouldn't be a new edition. It would just be a new printing of an edition. So, well, that's actually an option. So rather than doing a new edition, maybe they do a reprinting, a 5th edition, and just format things so that some of the things that are problematic now can be shuffled around a little bit, reworded, and just made cleaner. That is one way to go. I don't think that's the way they'll end up going, simply because I don't think that will produce a whole lot of profit. If there's no content change or minimal content change, and I think the vast majority of the customer base is not going to repurchase the product just because it looks different. So I don't think that that's likely. So changes are probably imminent. What could be changed and what should be changed? Well, the answer to those two questions vary immensely depending on who you ask. And this goes back to what I was saying earlier. D&D is a very, very personal experience. Actually, did I say that earlier? I don't know, but I'm saying it now. D&D is a very personal experience. Role-playing games are a very personal experience. They vary from table to table. And each person that runs a game, each person that plays the game gets something different out of it. So that makes making a game very difficult to appease everybody. So what can be done about that? I mean, what can be done to ensure that you appeal to the largest, broadest audience? Well, one thing you do is you can do play tests like they did with 5th edition, send out a lot of surveys, try to figure out what the vast majority of people want. But the problem with that is, if you're appealing to the vast majority, then you are going to, you're probably going to make an okay game, but you're not going to make a game that is loved. You're going to make a game that is okay, liked by, the majority of people, but it's not going to be your best work. So what can be done about that? Well, I have some ideas, and I'm nobody. I'm just a DM. I've been running a game for 35 years, and I'm just a guy in the basement, cluttered with 35 years worth of stuff I've accumulated. A lot of it is gaming stuff. And so I have a lot of investment in gaming. And if I'm going to be spending my future money on a new edition, I want to have certain things in the edition. And so I think my voice is one that should be heard. But of course, the powers that be are probably more interested in the demographic that is, in the probably the earlier stages of their gaming life cycles, and that's where I would be concerned with if I were a gaming manufacturer. Is what are my younger customers that have a whole lifetime of purchases ahead of them? Wanting out of this game, and how can I draw more new blood into the game? So that's probably the primary focus of Wizards of the Coast. And admittedly, they've brought a lot of people on board with 5th edition, although I have to say it's probably not because of the system itself. The system is good, but it's not that good. I'd have to say that the popularity of D&D today is probably due more to streaming and shows like Critical Role than the system itself. Now, having said that, I think the system is good, and I think it's probably the most accessible system that we've had in a while, or if ever. But I don't think that the system itself is conducive to new GMs or new players to the degree that it can be. So I do believe that that would be the primary focus of the publisher and the game designers for a 6th edition. But I have some ideas, and I don't think that my ideas are unreasonable. A lot of my ideas are personal to me, so they might not appeal to a broader audience, but my ideas do serve to illustrate how a GM like me has specific needs and what can be done with the system to address the changing needs or the individual needs of the DMs that are out there, so that this next edition appeals to the broadest audience possible. So let's see what, first of all, my issues with D&D are, so I can address what my ideas are. So my issues with D&D are quite a few. That's not to say that my issues with D&D are game breakers. Like I said, I played D&D. I have a whole shelf full of D&D stuff, so I clearly like the game. But I still have issues with the game. And my issues are not game-breaking issues, but they are issues that, at a certain point, they get to me enough that make me not want to play D&D anymore and search for other alternatives, which is kind of where I'm at right now. And so what can be done to prevent that sort of disenchantment with the system itself? Well, let's talk about what my issues are. So first of all, my issues, and this is not in any particular order. The first one I have down here is classes and subclasses. My problem with classes and subclasses with D&D right now is that there are too many of them, and they dilute the core classes that I believe are like the iconic classes of Dungeons and Dragons. So if you really boil D&D down and fantasy role-playing games down to their very essence, the very core concepts of the game, you really only have two classes. You have classes that deal with issues in a physical way through combat, through martial combat, through ranged combat, through fighting, weapons, that sort of thing. And then you have classes that deal with issues from a magic standpoint or from a spiritual standpoint. And that would be your wizards and clerics casting spells, uttering prayers, that sort of thing. I would say that you could throw a third class in there to say that there is a class that deals with issues through the use of skills. So rather than answering every problem with combat or with magic, you do so through the use of the clever use of your various skills. So I think there are two core classes because the skill system can be built on these two core classes. But if you want to pull that third one out and incorporate it as a skill class, I'm okay with that. But anyway, at the most, there are three core classes. And everything is built off of those three core class concepts. So your fighter is your martial class, your wizard is your spellcasting class, your cleric is your spellcasting class, and your rogue is your basically your skill class. But it's also, they deal with monsters the same way as fighters do by using weapons. So they're also fighter class. So I would say that with classes and subclasses, you have those core concepts. Now, the wonderful thing about D&D that they did right from the get-go is that they created the concept of a class, which is basically a bundle of abilities that's prepackaged to create a concept of a character. right? So that you can just jump into the game. You say a fighter, you know what a fighter is. A fighter is a guy that has a sword or an axe or a bow, and they deal with things in those ways. You say the word wizard, you know what a wizard is. A wizard casting spells left and right, using magic to alter the cosmic forces of the universe. Um, these things are very iconic because of the various media we've been exposed to over the years, and so we know what those things are. So creating a class in a role playing game makes it easy for somebody to come into the game and say, "What do I want to play? Oh, I don't know. What can I play?" A lot of people will say, "Well, role playing games should let you play any concept that you can think of." And I don't necessarily disagree with that, but I have a problem with people that think that new players can just come in and know what they want to play. New players have no idea what they're doing. So they really don't know what they want to play. Maybe they're leaning towards somebody that hits people with a stick. Maybe they're leaning towards somebody that, sneaks around and backstabs people. But for the most part, they just want to play the game and get to know the game before, they figure out all the inner workings of the game. So the class system lets them very easily envision what their character would be doing in the course of the game. So a fighter will be fighting. A thief is going to be sneaking around, stealing shit. Rogue is going to be sneaking around, stealing stuff, and being the sneaky character. A cleric is going to be the moral voice of the party, the healer, the buffer in some games. So these packages that are called classes are a great way of putting abilities together so that people that come into the game know what they're getting and know what their class is offering so that they can make an informed choice to have fun. And ultimately, that's what they want to do, is have fun playing a character that they can identify with. So all that to say is that classes are a great idea, but I feel like the game designers feel like they have to create new classes in order to keep the game fresh. And I don't have a problem with new classes as long as the classes don't take away or dilute the core essence of the core classes, or the essence of the core classes. And that's what I feel like we are doing with some of the classes that have been developed for D&D. So let me give you an example of what I'm talking about here. So we have wizards are my favorite class, by the way. I love wizards. I've always been drawn to magic and that part of the game system. So that's where my heart lies. And I feel like they have taken the concept of the wizard and just watered it down so badly that the wizard isn't even, isn't even an important character anymore, because there are so many other classes that have pieces of the wizard that you don't really need a wizard anymore. You can just boot him out the door. We've got this bard over here that can do half of what you do. And we've got this warlock over there can do, the other half of what you can do. So what do we need you for, wizard? So I really feel like they go too far in taking what makes a class special and giving that to other classes. I have a real problem with that, because I firmly believe that a wizard should be the only class that casts spells. I mean, this may be a controversial thought, but a spell is a spell book or scroll, or some form of written formula to recite words and use gestures and perhaps use material components in order to create a magical effect. So to me, that is what wizards do. Or witches, if you want to assign a gender to it. I don't. I think a wizard could be male or female, but the term witch is out there, and some people want to say that a witch is something different than a wizard, but really a witch is the same thing as a wizard. They cast spells, albeit they have a different, they have different PR in the various media where they're portrayed, but ultimately, they cast spells, And so they're another form of wizard. Now, is there room for making a class called a witch that does something different than the wizard? Sure, there is. You could very easily say, I want to create a witch, and this witch is not a wizard. This witch is focused on, doing a different type of magic. They focus on curse magic, or they focus on, magic that deals with affinities with certain things. And so, if you want to create a new class and give it its own identity, no problem with that. In fact, I would like to see more of that. But the problem with that is it's difficult because you have to create a new system for that new class. And the low-hanging fruit in D&D and a lot of other role-playing games is take the existing system and just spread it out. Let more people do things with the same mechanics that are already in place. And I hate that. I hate that other classes can cast spells. I hate it. I don't like it at all. So that is my main problem with classes and subclasses, is that they dilute from other classes. And I would like to see something done about that. So we'll talk about that more in a little bit. All right, races. My problem with races is that my first problem with race is that no role-playing game ever gets race right. A race, in my opinion, let me back up a little bit. In every role-playing game I've ever played in, with the exception of maybe a couple, every character that is played is portrayed as a human. Because that's what we know. We know humans because we are humans. And so having these other races are basically just saying, you have a human with pointy ears that, also has, sharp senses. Or you have the squatty human over here that has the ability to see in the dark. That's, in my opinion, that's not what a race is. A race, and I'm not talking about races in the real world. I don't really want to get into that discussion. I'm talking about what my concept of race should be in a game. And if you're just going to have a human that has certain characteristics that are different than other humans, then you can create alternate humans and you can give them pointy ears or whatever, but you don't necessarily need to call them an elf. In my opinion, a race is not only it's a different species. It may be humanoid. It may have skin and it may have hair, or it may have scales and it may be bald, no hair, or perhaps it has tentacles. But it has very different, not only physical attributes, but it also has very different cultural attributes. And I just don't think that any role-playing game goes far enough to really create a race that is truly apart from humans. Now, I get it. I mean, we're playing fantasy games. You don't want to have to think too hard. And I get that. And that's why, I'm fine with playing races like they exist in D&D today. I'm just saying, this has always been kind of a core issue of mine. And if you really want to get innovative with a role-playing game, find a way to take race or species or ancestry or whatever you want to call it and truly make it something that is alien from humans. Because really, everybody plays a human. And if you really want to play a different race, make it different and put it in the game so that it is easier to play it that way. Because playing an alien does not come naturally, obviously, because we have no idea, we have no concept of what an alien race is or how it would act. But we can imagine what that might be like. And some of us with better imaginations than others can put that into game mechanics and help others role play a different species better. Okay, so that's race. They'll never do anything with race, so that was basically a waste of time to talk about that, but I wanted to get it off my chest, so there you go. All right, action economy. That is something that is a big thorn in my side with D&D right now. And that's mostly because I feel like when I'm running a game, I will have, first character go, they do their action, they have their movement, they're done. Second character goes, they have their action, they have their movement, go. Then we get to the fighter, and he has his action. Then he has his bonus action, and then he has his movement. Oh, and then he has a reaction that he takes. Oh, are you done, fighter? Yeah. Oh, wait, I didn't finish my move. Okay, so are you done now? Yeah. Okay, good. Then we go to the rogue. Okay, he takes his action. Are you done? No, I'm going to move. Okay, are you done now? No, I got a bonus action to do this. Okay, so do your bonus action. Okay. Oh, by the way, I'm going to use my reaction for this. It's too much. It's too much. I'm spending way too much time on certain people that have certain classes, where the other characters are, basically they do their action, they do their movement, and they're done. And this is getting more and more on my nerves, and it's to the point where I just don't even want to play D&D anymore because of bonus actions, and to a certain degree, reactions as well. And so I feel like that needs to be addressed. I feel like we need to have some ability in the game to have to be able to stretch the rules. And the action economy is one area where you can do that. But and I'm okay with doing that occasionally. But when you do it every round, that gets to be problematic because it slows the game down, and the other characters that don't have that capability are bored. And so we need to stop with the bonus actions and all of the things that can trigger a reaction. We need to do something about that. So we'll talk about potential solutions in a little bit. All right, static combat, that's another problem I have. And you could probably say that maybe it's my DMing style. And I may say maybe you're right. But the rules certainly don't help. And one example of this is, and what do I mean by static combat? Basically what I mean is, okay, so you just setting up a typical encounter, you enter a room, there's a bunch of orcs in the room, the orcs start banging their shields and charging at you. Roll initiative. You roll initiative. You go in the first order. The fighter goes, runs up to the first orc, starts bashing on the orc. The orc, not wanting to draw an attack of opportunity, has to stick there, starts bashing the fighter. The fighter, not wanting to draw an attack of opportunity, bashes the orc back. So they just bash each other back and forth until one's dead. Then you can move on to the next orc. Or worse, your fighter is blocking the doorway. The rest of the party is behind him in the hall, and the orcs are lined up, trying to get to the fighter and trying to get to everybody, but they're in the room, and the fighter's blocking the door. So all the fighter can do is bash the orcs as they come in one at a time. And as each orc falls, a new one goes in its place. The rest of the party standing behind the fighter, bored out of their minds. Maybe they can shoot through the ranks. Maybe they can cast a spell over their heads or something like that. But for the most part, they're stuck in a hall while the fighter is doing all the dirty work up front. There's a problem with that. And I have a big problem in that the mechanics of the game discourages movement because of the attacks of opportunity. And although I think an attack of opportunity has a place in the game, I think it has become way too prevalent and way too much of the core combat mechanics. And so I think that that causes, in a lot of my experience, that causes this problem with static combat, where you set the stage, people move their pieces to where they're going to be, and then they're stuck there for at least 2 or 3 rounds, or in some cases where, for the entire combat. Now, can I do things to shuffle things up as a DM? Sure, I can, have environmental effects move things around. I could have, I could put things in the room to encourage movement, but for the most part, I have to do all the work while the players just sit there and roll their dice. I have a problem with that. Static combat is a problem for me. All right, advantage and disadvantage. I've got a real problem with advantage and disadvantage. It's too good. It is too good. Especially at higher levels. when characters have the ability to impose disadvantage and to grant advantage, you have a scenario pretty much every round where somebody has advantage and all the bad guys get disadvantaged at some point over and over and over again. And it's too much. It's too much because disadvantage is too bad for bad guys and advantage is too good for the good guys. Now, can it be good for the bad guys? Well, sure. And is it too good for the bad guys? Sure. But it's too good and it's too bad simultaneously. So that needs to be reworked. I like the concept of simplifying things so that you don't have bonuses stacking on top of each other and people coming back and saying, oh, I forgot this +1, or oh, I forgot this other +1, or oh, I have a -1 for this. That was 3rd edition, and that was problematic. And I understand why they went with the advantage and disadvantage. It's simple, it's easy, and it is faster, but it's too good. So what can we do differently, but maintain the simplicity of the application of that concept? Conditions. That is another problem that I have, although I have to say it's really with just pretty much one condition, or really any condition that that messes with the action economy to the degree where we have a player or we have an NPC that is robbed of their action economy. And the reason I have a problem with that is because if you're on the player side, your player is sitting there bored because they're stunned or they're unconscious or whatever. They can't do anything. So they're not even playing the game at that point. With NPCs, I have a problem with NPCs being stun locked is the term. And, that's a term that came up in earlier editions. I don't even know where it originated, but it's been present pretty much in every edition to a certain degree because you've always had the ability to take out an opponent without, without going through their hit points. There is a way to stun them so that they are no longer a threat. And I have a problem with that because it becomes way too overused and it is applied in scenarios that should not be able to be applied to, simply because part of the job as a DM is to create an encounter that is challenging and that is fun and that is going to make the encounter memorable for the players. And when you create this boss character and you have a final scene with this boss character and you have the players going up against him and him or her, and you have the boss stunned, early in the fight or anywhere in the fight for that matter, that takes all that basically makes that boss a moron. At that point, he is basically he's a punching bag. That's it. All the fear, all of the thrill, all of everything that goes into making a challenging encounter goes out the window because you have shown that with a specific ability or with a specific attack or whatever, you can rob this character of their actions. And therefore you can gang up on them and start beating on them like Keystone Cops. If you don't know what Keystone Cops are, then look it up. But I made you myself there. But at any rate, the point I'm trying to make is that with any condition that robs of the action economy is problematic. So that needs to be addressed. Particularly stun. I'm looking at you, stunned. I'm looking at you. Unconscious too, but mostly stunned. All right, so that is conditions. Magic. I got a lot of stuff listed here. I've got problems with magic. Spell slots, I like the concept of spell slots, but there's issues with it. Saving throws. The biggest problem I have with saving throws is from the GM standpoint, when I have 20 goblins out on the field and the wizard casts a fireball, I have to make 20 fucking saving throws. That means I'm spending the next 30 to 45 seconds clicking on my token, rolling the saving throw, seeing if the guy made it, marking him so that I remember that the guy made it or failed, and then applying the damage appropriately for those that made it or failed. That takes way too much time. I don't have time for that. The characters don't want to wait for me to do all that crap. Saving throws are problematic when they're applied to large numbers. So the whole concept of saving throws needs to be reworked to address that particular issue. So I don't have a problem with saving throws necessarily. I just have a problem with how saving throws are applied with large groups. So that's something that needs to be addressed. Spell levels versus character levels. This is minor quip with me, but it's always bugged me that you have spell levels 1 through 9, but character levels 1 through 20. If you're a first level character, you cast first level spells. If you're a second level character, you would think you would cast second level spells, but you don't. You're still casting only first level spells. If you're a third level caster, you would think you would cast third level spells, but you don't. You are just now getting second level spells. And so that is too confusing. It's needlessly confusing. That needs to be changed in a future edition. And then, as already mentioned, too many spellcasters. And I'll talk about that more later. All right, armor class system. I have a problem with the armor class system simply because it requires that characters wear armor in order to be hard to hit. And that means that if armor is a requirement, then that means that armor has to be something that your characters can use in any situation or in most situations. And what that does for me is that limits my ability to come up with scenarios that would be problematic for players that are wearing armor. And not necessarily scenarios, because a scenario I can deal with a character having to take their armor off for a particular scene, but more so, long story arcs or campaigns that deal in regions where armor is not practical. So, for example, if I were to want to run a game in Dark Sun, which we can't in 5th edition currently, but if I were to say, hey, let's do a Dark Sun game, I can't do a Dark Sun game because I would have to rework all the monster to hit abilities because none of the characters can wear heavy armor. They probably can't even wear or shouldn't wear medium armor because in Dark Sun, the world is hot. It's a hot desert. You don't wear armor when you're in a hot desert. At the very most, maybe you're wearing some kind of light armor. You can wear shields, no problem with shields. Shields don't, retain body heat. But armor does. And in a setting where you are, in a hot place, or let's say you're in an ocean-going environment. So you're on a ship. Maybe you're merchants, or maybe you're privateers, or maybe you're pirates, or whatever. Are you really going to wear heavy armor when you're on a boat and you could very easily go overboard and sink to the bottom of the ocean and drown? Probably not. Are you going to be your most effective as a crewmate when you're lugging around half plate on your boat? Probably not. So, wearing armor in certain campaign environments just doesn't make sense. So basically what you have to do then is you have to, as a DM, you have to make sure that, oh, well, I've got my campaign on a ship. So now I can't have, or I'm going to have to take it easy on my to hit rolls. Because the players are much easier to hit, or the characters are much easier to hit because they can't wear their heavy armor. I don't think that I should have to do that work. I don't think that should be baked into the system that way. I think that the armor class system should account for any environment that you want to play in, and armor should be practical and should make sense for the campaign that you're running. So, and I think that there's room in the armor class system to do that, just not with the way it's built today. So that's one problem I have with it. The hit point system I also have a problem with, and here's where I'll boil it down to the bare essence of the problem I have with it. You hit 0 hit points, you fall unconscious, and you start bleeding out and making death saving throws. So you are starting to die at 0 hit points. You make your death saving throw. If you fail 3 times, you're dead. However, if you succeed, then you are no longer dying, and basically you're just at 0 hit points and waiting for somebody to throw a potion of healing down your throat. So, so you're at 0. You're either dying or you're not dying. There's no kind of middle ground. Being wounded to the point where you're dying is a condition that doesn't go away just because you make 3 saving throws. It is something that is pretty permanent until somebody comes along and changes it by applying healing to you. So the whole concept of hit points, where at one point you're at full combat capability with 1 hit point, then you're at 0 hit points, and somebody comes along and gives you 2 hit points back, so you're back to full capability, then you're back to 0 hit points and dying again, but somebody gives you another 1 or 2 points of healing, then you're back up to full combat readiness. It just does not compute in my brain. There are no consequences, for the most part, for going to 0 hit points. And plus, you fall unconscious when you're at 0 hit points, so you're out of the game. And that takes me back to the conditions and the action economy issue. So, being unconscious and making death saving throws, you can say that that's part of the game. You're still participating in the game. No, you're not. You're sitting there rolling a die every time your turn comes around just to see if you can continue playing the game later on. At this point, you are a bump in the road. People are stepping over you, and you're praying that somebody doesn't kick you hard enough where you take another point of damage and causes you to fail 2 of your death saving throws. So I have a problem with the hit point system, and I think that can be addressed. Monster design. Monsters should not be designed the same way as characters. Monster design should be streamlined. Monster design should give you only the information you need. I don't need to know how many skills a monster has. I don't care. I don't care that a monster has the ability to be stealthy. If I want the monster to be stealthy, I'll make him stealthy. I don't need that sort of information. What I need for monsters, if I'm actually even looking at a monster stat block, it's because that monster is in a combat scenario with the characters. So I need combat data, period. And all these long ass stat blocks, monster stat blocks, and I was trying to find one to show real quick, but all these monster stat blocks that we get with any edition of D&D, with the exception of 4th edition. 4th edition did it right. But with the other editions of D&D, they give you way too much information. And I really, truly think that there is room for improvement, and people are actually already working on this. For those of you that watch Matt Colville, very popular YouTuber, he has his action-based stat block concept, and I hope he produces something with it, like a monster book. That would be great, because that's pretty much what I'm looking for. A stat block that basically has the core information that I need to run a combat for that particular monster. And that monster is only going to last 1 to maybe 4 or 5 rounds if they're lucky. And so that is all I need. I don't need something that is going to last, information that stretches over 5 pages. So let me just show you the stat block here. And maybe this is a bad example, but because this is a fairly streamlined stat block, but we've got lines and lines of information here, and this isn't terrible, but for the most part, a lot of the stuff, it's unnecessary. False appearance. While the armor remains motionless, it's indistinguishable from a normal suit of armor. I don't need that. I don't need that in the stat block. That can be in the monster description below the stat block if you want. If you want to describe monster tactics, put it there. One of the tactics for the animated armor is it remains motionless. While it remains motionless, it's indistinguishable from a normal suit of armor. Great. Doesn't need to be in the monster stat block. It takes up space. I don't care. Languages. Why is that even in the stat block? It doesn't speak any languages. Why is it there? Challenge rating, that needs to be in the, not necessarily a stat block, because I don't use the challenge rating during combat. I use it after combat to determine, or before combat to determine if I'm going to include the monster, or after combat to determine how many XPs. But I don't need that in the stat block. Put that in the monster description. Monster stats. Do I really need to know what the monster stats are? I just need to know what their ability modifiers are. I don't need to know that this monster has a 14 strength. I don't care. In fact, do I really even need the modifiers? Give me one or two modifiers. Give me a physical modifier. Give me a mental modifier. Give me two modifiers, and I'm good to go. The rest of this is fine. Armor class, hit points, speed. Need to know how fast the thing is. Unit conditions. Senses. Senses. If it has different senses, like this has blind sight, great. But, passive perception, I have a problem with passive perception, so I really don't need that. But, blind sight, I need to know that it has blind sight, so that's okay. But at any rate, my point here is that there's too much information that we don't need in a stat block that is included. So it needs to be streamlined to a large degree. And this is a bad example because it's a fairly streamlined stat block already, because this monster, there's not much to this monster. But when you get to other monsters that have big, long stat blocks that have way too much information in it, that becomes problematic. Okay, magic items. I have a problem with magic items because there's not enough of them, and they're too good. A lot of cases, they are too good. They have too many abilities, and they're too good. So we need to have more interesting magic items that we can hand out as DMs for loot, because we, like it or not, Wizards of the Coast, like it or not, players like loot. They like going into dungeons, they like finding loot, they like taking loot, and they like using loot. They like finding magic weapons, they like using magic weapons or magic items. They like this stuff. This has been in the game since the first edition, since before the first edition. You can't design a game and say, well, magic items are optional. No, they're not really optional anymore. They are expected. So create a range of magic items that we can throw at them. Make them one-use magic items if you want to, like Numenera does. Numenera has a great concept. One-use item. You use it, you dispose of it. That way you can give out more, because people like getting stuff. So magic items I have a problem with. And then finally, published adventures. Wizards of the Coast published adventures are too long. Too long. They are too long and too expensive and too complicated. And they don't span enough levels. So this game is built. Oh, and that's I didn't even put that in there. So, whoops. Let me go back. Anyway, this is what I'm talking about next. But the level system is the other problem I have. They build the game around levels 1 through 20, and yet they only support the game through levels 1 through 10 for the most part. Maybe a little bit into the lower teens, but they never support it out to the 20s. And the majority of the support is for the 1st through 10th level games. Fine. If that's what your game is going to be focused on, then make the game centered around those levels, and then create optional game systems for anything above 10th level. Why are you creating a game that's 1 through 20 if you're not supporting 10 through 20? Why? That makes no sense whatsoever. And your published adventures, they need work. They're way too complicated, way too expensive, and way too much work for a GM to run. So those are my basic problems with D&D. Now, what would I like 6th edition to look like? Trying to produce some answers to all of these things that I threw out there that I say are issues. Well, Most of the things that I have as issues boil down to the fact that a lot of the rules and a lot of the things in the game are hard-coded into the game. And that makes it hard for me as a GM to come up with house rules in order to be able to modify the game so that those things are no longer problems in my game. I can take the parts I don't like out and I can plug in the parts that I like, right? And to do that, you have to have a very small, streamlined, simple core system. Now, 5th edition started off with this concept. They actually advertised that that's what 5th edition was going to be. It was going to be a very simple, basic system with modules that you can tack on to build the game that you want to build. If you want your game to be more like a 2nd edition game, you can tack on these modules. If you want it to be more like a 4th edition game, you can tack on these modules. That's what they advertised it as, but it's not what we got. We were falsely led to believe that we were going to get a modular game system, and we didn't. Now, did they include some modules? Yes, they did. Some good ones in the DMG. And that is what I'm talking about. That's what they need to do. They need more of that. But to do more of that, they need to make the core system much, much more basic. So what do I mean by that? Well, basically, the core system, if you boil it down to its bare minimum, the very essence of the game relies upon the core mechanic of rolling a d20, adding any appropriate modifiers based on either character abilities or based on situational modifiers. So a d20 roll to determine randomness, a modifier to determine situational or character, to represent character ability or to represent situational modifiers, or both, and compare those things, that number, that result, to a difficulty. So the difficulty number is based off of a number of factors, whether the task that they're trying to accomplish falls on the spectrum of easiness from, very easy to very difficult or impossible. And so that's the essence of the system. That's a D20 system right there. That's it. Everything else is built on top of that concept. Everything. So saving throws, that's built on top of that concept. The magic system is built on top of that concept. Advantage and disadvantage is built on top of that concept. So everything is built on that. So everything else is modular. So all you need really to do is to build your basic D&D game based off of that very basic concept and have some very, very basic pre-packaged characters and monsters and magic system, because a magic system has to be somewhat different than the core system. Although I would argue that at its core, it needs to be the same as well. But once you determine success or failure, that's when the magic system diverges and it has to be resolved. Now, in the basic system that I just mentioned, roll a d20, add modifiers, and compare to a difficulty number. That just determines success or failure. Once you determine success or failure, then you apply a result to that. The result is typically either damage or some type of condition that is applied to one or both parties, or some type of effect happens. So those are all modular. Those are all things that can be tinkered with in order to fit into D&D. So you need kind of like a baseline of what happens after you fail or succeed. And so you build your core classes around very basic concept. A fighter does damage. A wizard casts a spell. And the spells either do damage or they do magical things. A cleric heals or can produce miraculous effects. A thief either overcomes an environmental effect or does damage, or is able to traverse a difficult obstacle. All of these are very basic core things to the core classes that I mentioned way back at the beginning of this video. And so that is your basic game. Just create a very, very simple basic game. And call that D&D. That is basic D&D right there. That can be like a 10-page booklet at the most. And after that, the rest of your 600-page rule book or whatever is your modules, are your modules. And these are the things that you as your GM can plug into your game to make your game as unique as you want it to be. That is a truly modular system. Now, is it easy to do? No, I don't think it's easy to do. In fact, I've actually taken a crack at it a couple times myself, and it's a lot of work because these modules can be unbalancing if you don't do them right. So, your core system has to be solid. And then you have to really think through your modules. And as you produce your modules, you really have to play with them in the system, and you have to be aware of how they affect gameplay. You can apply, these modules, but you have to know how they interact with each other. So if you apply a damage reduction module over here, what's that going to do to the damage output of your monsters? The damage output of your monsters may have to go up, or what's that going to do to your armor class system? So all of these things have to, they have to work together. So the modules have to be able, you have to be able to plug it in and still work within the confines of the basic system. Or the module itself has to address how the basic system has to change in order to accommodate the module. So, it can be done. It's just a lot of work. And then I can always hear the people that don't like that concept say, well, it's a lot of work for the DM. Maybe it's a lot of work up front, but once you have it in, once you have your game set the way you want it, then you're happy and you don't have to tinker with it later. Or if you tinker with it, you can unplug this module and throw it over here. So I think that a truly modular D&D is what 6th edition should look like. That way, Wizards of the Coast, this is gold I'm handing you here. You can actually put together a basic D&D game with a modular system as your core system. And then you can turn right around and sell us a prepackaged advanced D&D game that has the modules that you think make a great game, and sell that same game to us that you already sold to us all over again. And then you can sell us another game and call it the Dark Sun game. And this Dark Sun games has these modules rearranged in the game system so that you can play Dark Sun. And then you have another system over here that you call the Spelljammer system. And the Spelljammer system takes these modules and throws them together a little bit differently than the other modules in Spelljammer or in Dark Sun. And then you can have, an unlimited number of these different variants of your same game that you're selling to us over and over again, because you are customizing it for a campaign setting or a campaign concept. And you're already sold us the core rules, and you're selling it to us all over again. And I would buy it because I'm gullible. And I don't want to do all that hard work if I don't have to. And you're already providing me the concept that I kind of was wanting to build already. So this is gold, people. You can do this. This is a modular rule system. This is what you do. You're game designers. Make it work. All right. So modular rules. Short adventure modules is my answer to their current system. Their current system of setting out adventures, and I understand why they're doing it. They want to create a storyline so that they can sell video games. They can produce these big events in D&D Live around Curse of the Frost Maiden or whatever it's called, or Baldur's Gate, or Out of the Abyss. They want these big stories. And for these big stories, you need a big book to tell this big story, right? No, you don't. You don't need this big book to tell this big story. Why are you selling us a $50 adventure that has all these problems in it because it's a big fat book? And I don't want to spend $50 on a book that I may or may not use. I may or may not run this adventure. In fact, I have every D&D adventure for 5th edition that's been produced up here on my shelf. Have I run a single one of them? No. The only one I've run actually is the starter set adventure, Fandelver. I have never run any of the hardback books to date. I haven't, because they're too thick and they're too complicated. Why are you buying them? Because I'm an idiot and I have disposable income and I like to support my hobby. I am an idiot, but I am also old with a good job and I have that disposable income. If I were 20 years old, I would not have all those books up there because I would not be able to afford $50 for an adventure that I may or may not run. So what should they be doing instead? Well, here's what putting out a storyline is great. I think that's a great idea. It helps to make iconic storylines like Tyranny of Dragons and Curse of Strahd. Those are iconic. Those are going to last for a while. People are going to remember those storylines. Are they actually going to remember running the adventures? Probably not, because most of them probably won't even get through the entire adventure because they're too fucking long. The adventures or the storylines are a great idea. So what do they do differently? My idea is not even a new idea. It's what they used to do. You create a line of modules for the adventure. You have a low level, a mid level, and a high level. That way you can sell all these modules to your customers as they need them. And I know the marketing department's over here saying, well, that's the problem. They won't buy the high level adventures because they stop playing at 6 level. Well, again, go back to your core game and revise it so it's not a 1 through 20 game. Don't blame the consumer because real life causes them to stop playing somewhere between 6th and 10th level. You have to see the market trends and you have to modify your game to fit the market trends. So build a base core system around a 1 through 10 level game. It's already being done in other game systems. I have them listed right here. Dungeon Crawl Classics, that's a 1 through 10th level game. 13th Age, that's a 1 through 10th level game. Numenera is a 1 through 6th level game. Shadow of the Demon Lord is a 1 through 10th level game. It's already being done. The rest of the market is already going there. So that is what you do, Wizards of the Coast. So, and that goes on to my last bullet point. Innovative mechanics and marketing. Look at what these other publishers are doing. And I know you're the top dog. I know you outsell these other game companies by a astronomical margin, but that doesn't mean what you're doing is the best way. And if you revise all of your things like I have laid out here, have a core system that's 1 through 10, that's modular, that you can create additional content for using the same stuff you've already sold us, with short adventure modules that people can purchase at a very low price point that build on each other rather than having to purchase everything in one bundle up front. And market it so that it's affordable and we can pick up these things on Drive-Thru RPG, or we can pick them up at our local gaming store at a very reasonable price and play them over the course of a very few sessions. And that's the other thing. Look at your marketing. Look at your data. How often do sessions fizzle out, or how often do gaming groups fizzle out? They usually fizzle out within 3 months of starting. So make your campaign shorter. Make it so that you can complete a campaign in 3 months, or at least make it so that groups that want to complete a game or have to complete a game in 3 months can do so without ending the campaign a third of the way through. Okay, So that's pretty much it. That's what I would do for 6th edition. Those are my issues with D&D. Again, I love D&D. That's the only reason I'm even having this discussion, is because I love D&D. I love what it has brought to my life. I love the imagination that it has sparked within me. But it's not being handled well. And and I know it's making more money it's ever made. I get that it's being handled well from a money making standpoint. It's being handled great if you're just looking at that. But if you're looking at longevity, and you're specifically looking at a 6th edition, because the 5e money is going to run out, and then you're going to try to reboot it, and then you're going to get all kinds of fan backlash once you reboot it, because this has happened over and over again. You're going to split the fan base, and then you're going to have the 5e users versus the 6e users versus the 4e users versus the 3e users versus the Pathfinder users versus the Dungeon Crawl Classic players over here. So if you want to avoid all that, make your game as appeasable to everybody, all crowds, as possible by making it modular, simple, short adventures, cheap to purchase, and market it in a way that everybody has a chance to buy it, not just the people that can afford $50 books. All right, so that's it for me in this particular video. I appreciate you watching. If you like my videos, give me a like. Share your comments if you think I'm an idiot or if you agree with anything I say. Love to hear about it. But at that rate, yeah. So at any rate, I'm done. So thank you for watching, and I will catch you next time.